Welcome to Always Outnumbered, Never Outgunned. I'm your host, Austin Owens. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. We're here with our guest today, Russell Kiggins. He was a US Army Infantryman, deployed with me in 2011 to Afghanistan. He's an outstanding friend, husband, father, who's always trying to better himself. Today we're going to discuss his time in the military, transitioning out, and the adversities he's been faced with. Thanks for being here, Kiggins.
How's it going?
It's good to see your fucking face, man.
Yes. Definitely have gotten a bit older, a lot more filled out than I was in the Army days, man. I was a toothpick then.
Yeah, talk about it, dude. So tell me about your time in the military.
So time in the military started out in 2009, basic training, just like the rest of us infantry guys. Benning, it was pretty cool. I'd never been on an airplane, up until, my younger years. My mom says I used to fly all over Florida, but my first actual remember, as a teenage boy flying on an airplane by myself, was to Georgia, so that was experience with self,
For sure.
I didn't know what it was like being on an airplane. Get through basic, and long and short of it, it was pretty cool because in basic, they did a little different with my unit. They had 10 slots available for South Korea.
Oh, yeah,
And a lot of people are already picked or had orders, but they wanted to give people opportunities who said, hey, do we have any people who might want to volunteer for an overseas assignment coming right out of basic? I says, why the hell not?
Yeah.
I'm 19. This is my first time in the military. I just went through the worst 9 weeks of my life. I was like, let's do this. So, I actually decided, why not? So I took orders to South Korea. So first duty station right out the bat. South Korea, man.
I heard that place is crazy too.
Oh man, Camp Casey. It's like I can literally just revisualize the whole place, going through the gate all the way to the back where my barracks were, all the way up on the top of the hill.
Sure, I can imagine.
It was a great experience, as a young kid, 19, going to South Korea, almost 20 actually. Because I remember I turned 21 in Korea, and that in itself was frat boy, party crazy.
Yeah. Did they beat the shit out of you? You get pink bellied?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
oh,
good.
Good old Army traditions. It's
Yeah,
it's
for
your
sure.
birthday, we're going to flip your shirt up, slap the belly. But South Korea was a great experience, really kind of showed me a different side of the world, different side of the cultures. Moving forward, it was funny because then I get orders. They're like, "Oh, your next duty assignment's Fort Riley, Kansas."
Where's that?
Fuck Kansas. What's so fuck?
I did the same thing. But hold on, before you move to Fort Riley, I want to ask you something. I remember you having a specific belt or something like that, a belt buckle from Korea.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Explain that. Can you explain? Because I thought that was really cool.
The Manchu Mile is what they call it, and what it is it's a 30-mile ruck march. You start at 3 in the morning, and you don't finish until the next day. You pretty much walk through the night.
Sure.
And what it is you start a ruck march, and it was like a 45-pound ruck or something of that sort. Something you would think, oh, this ain't no big deal. I got this. Your weapon system, and you put your boots on, you get in some PTs, and you just start walking. And you go on this crazy walk. I'm going through these crazy trails and kind of mountains. I'm like, okay, this is cool. Well, by mile 12, I'm sitting here I hate my life right now. This is not
It's the worst decision ever made.
So, then you're mile 18, your feet are swelling and your back hurts and you're shifting your ruck and you're just you're moving and nothing is comfortable at that point. Then you get down, it's you're going and going. Before you know it, you look down. They're yeah, we're at mile 24, boys. We've got 8 more to go, or 6. I'm I feel like I've been walking for years already. I'm Forrest Gump over here.
Yeah, right.
So at this point, it's just your body is just, you're going through the motions.
Yeah.
And, then it eventually the ruck leads back onto Camp Casey. You know where you're at. You're on that home stretch. It's kind of
Yeah,
like doing a
sure.
PT test. You're that last quarter mile, and you have everyone yelling at you like, "Don't quit now!" You can see people just dropping like flies because they're just like legs are done, their feet are done. I had the opportunity to actually complete the Manchu Mile, and it's a really big thing because they take almost 3 months out of the summer to train for it.
Yeah, that's awesome,
Because
dude.
a 30-mile ruck march is not for the faint-hearted.
That's like I wanted to make sure to highlight that because I remember you always wearing it, and I remember you telling me the story, back in the day, but I couldn't recall the exact scenario. That's awesome. So, okay,
Yeah.
so then you get orders for Riley in the middle of fucking nowhere.
Yeah, so go to Riley, and I'm starting out there. I'm so young. I get there, get down to the unit, end up in Alpha Company 116,
Oh yeah,
and I'm learning about the background of the unit, and it's one of the most decorated units in the U.S. Army. And I was like, wow, I've gotten several big opportunities as just such a young soldier. I'm there, Alpha Company's coming together. Not even like few months in, they're like, "All right, boys, we're gearing up for Afghanistan." And I'm like thinking to myself,
yeah.
there's just no way. I'm 21 years old. I am not going to some combat zone yet. There's just this not happening. So they're like, it's 100% deployability. Everyone's going, lottie dottie. I'm like, all right, well, I guess, better pick up the phone, call my fiance at the time, call my family, and break the news. And I was just like super scared. I just didn't know what to expect, what we were getting into. And at that point, we were all together. Me, you,
Yeah.
the Alpha Company 116 that we remember.
We had Kunkel on. I had Kunkel on here not too long ago. He was a part of that too.
Exactly, yeah.
Austin
Sergeant
Menard,
Kunkel,
of course.
my platoon sergeant, I had the pleasure of being second platoon, got out there, called ourselves the cavemen,
Yeah.
It was a pretty crazy situation. I mean, a lifetime experience. And then, I mean, you can't put a value on that, that mission and what we did as a unit, and the trials we faced. And a lot of us were, I mean, to me, children.
Yeah.
These young
I turned 21 over there.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's right. I turned 21 in Afghanistan.
Oh, you did too.
What's that?
You did also?
No, I'm trying to think. Let's see that. I mean, my timeline, I probably mixed up here. I want to say I feel like I turned 21 in Korea.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Because I remember when I was living in the barracks. Yeah, I would have turned 21 in Korea. Because when I was living in the barracks in Fort Riley, that was that was a nightmare in itself, man. I got a story for you there.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Just super young. I still remember this. Young dumb soldiers with alcohol, living in a almost like hotel like building. You got your own room, and you share with people. I remember one night I drank quite a bit of Jack Daniels, and I see 2 cans of shaving cream, and I just, for the wildest reason, had this idea to run down the hallways, just everywhere.
Okay, I'm not surprised by this. Yes.
So this dude opens up his door, and all he does is fall down to, I can't remember the name. It's been so long.
CQ or whatever?
Okay. Yeah, CQ.
Okay, yeah.
CQ. The sergeant comes up and is just like, "You gotta be fucking kidding me!" And they're like, "What room is this guy in?"
Fucking Kiggins.
So I go. They find me in my room. I'm like passed out, 2 cans on the ground, shaving cream all over the floor. So I was always wild and just really outpaced as a young soldier.
You always brought the good energy, though, man. Like, I feel like you always brought the laughs. You brought the good energy. You're always that guy, which
oh yeah,
we love, obviously.
And that was the thing, with even with like Sergeant Franks. That's why I think he took me so much under his wing, because he was like, he's seen me for who I was. He's like, this is going to be somebody I can mold to be a squared away soldier if we could just get past the antics and the BS. Well, let's put us, like I said, months down the road. Now we're all in Afghanistan, and I'm doing the same silly shit, man. Just off the wall, like, Captain Peterson, now Captain, it's just like, at the time was second lieutenant, and just the man couldn't wrap his head around me. Like,
I
what
know.
goes on in that thing, And Staff Sergeant Kunkel's like, or Sergeant First Class Kunkel, is like, dude, we can only do so much to help you. I says,
That man loves you though. That man loves you to death, dude.
Oh no, and that, like I said, he was one of between Sergeant Franks and Sergeant Kunkel. If I had to say there were of NCO realm, those are the two most outstanding NCOs in my entire military career. That to this day I don't think I could ever forget what they were, who they are, what they did for me, the way they shaped me. There's lots of other people to name off,
Sure. We were lucky. We had good leadership. Alpha Company had really good leadership. And for the most part, it did.
Solid leadership. Like, you hear about all these other units, and like, you befriend other soldiers while you're on the base, which I did, and they'd be talking about their leadership, and I'm like, there's no way, man. Like, that can't be.
101st had some shit shows for sure.
It was terrible, man. And like I said, you can't put a value on what we gained from Alpha Company 116, especially me, because that was such a long stretch that I remember I was at Fort Riley almost 7 solid years.
Yeah, that's crazy. You were there for a long time.
Because I did just a little close to 8 before the whole involuntary separation happened for me. And that's when we came down, and Alpha Company was going to South Korea for a 9-month tour. Again, they wanted 100% deployability, but I only had 11 months. They wanted everyone to have at least 15 months of retention.
Sure.
So I remember, kind of fast forwarding way down the road, after a good stint at Fort Riley, 1 combat tour to Afghanistan, lots and lots of field training, gunneries. It was crazy to see that's how my military career wrapped up. Was like, well, you don't have enough time. Here's your ETS orders. Have a nice day.
Yeah. I mean, that's how they do it too, right? As soon as you're not good for them, you're done.
Yeah. And you're out,
You're out.
But, that's the thing is, like I said, I had a life of experience. I had a lot of learning curves, especially, if we kind of want to delve into like Afghan days.
Yeah, please do.
I remember very, very specifically one just key mistake as a soldier you just don't make.
Oh, let's hear it.
And I did it.
I believe it. Let's hear it.
So I'm on tower guard. We just got to Afghanistan. And I'm like, still trying to get the ropes of things, learning how to kind of stay up through the night, and that sleep deprivation that they train you for, during your FTX and the last half of your basic training, where you're just up for 3 days and you're going and going. And I remember just before we deployed, we got a bunch of shots and everyone got flu shots. And I remember I'm sitting there and I'm just kind of, doing the doze, and I'm like, I got to stand up. I got to do some squats, stuff to keep you going. And I remember there was another guy in there with me. It was one of the ALP guys, because remember we were always teamed up with one of those guys, and they never spoke English. And this guy's racked out on the floor, and I'm thinking, you gotta be kidding me, dude.
He doesn't care. He's like, oh, whatever. This guy's got it for me.
So I ended up falling asleep, just racked out, dead asleep. And the SOG at the time was with another unit when we were sharing where we were at. He came up and he didn't knock on the door because he's like, this is too quiet, not for someone to be awake. Came around where the little window was, where the machine pointed out. And sure as shit, I'm just like this. And I remember
this.
Like, get up. And, they pulled someone out. I remember it had to be like 2 a.m. They wake up Kunkel and his head just poof, blows off. Like, I remember I probably was crying just with like tears. Just, he's like, you know what you just did, and why would you do that? And you're our eyes up there. And I remember it was the wildest thing. Like, I was just like, what just happened, man?
Yeah, right.
I still remember it was a huge ordeal, very huge. I'm your guys' eyes when you're all asleep, in the hooches and stuff, and I'm over here sleeping on the tower. Anything could have happened. So it was funny because it turned into an Article 15 situation. I got stripped down to a PFC, extra duty, filling sandbags, and dead summer in Afghanistan. And I'm thinking, well, maybe next time I won't do this, you know? And, you know, it was the funniest thing because through some trials, through some learning, you know, adapting to the leadership that I served with while I was, you know, stationed out there, I really actually made a full turn. I was the only PFC to get demoted and re-promoted in the same year, all when we were overseas. And it was really hard because these guys were like, who does that? Like,
Who does?
And I was so well behaved, and they seen that. And, you know, our captain and our first sergeant, you know, I believe at the time was First Sergeant Conley.
Yeah, I think so too.
And then Lingle, Captain Lingle.
Yeah, I forget.
Brandon Lingle. That was the head of our leadership in Afghanistan. But then midway, we actually had a change of a command. Remember, First Sergeant Conley left, and we got a new first sergeant some way through. I remember, if I'm not mistaken, he was a bald-headed guy.
Yeah, I remember him not liking us when we came back.
Oh,
he was like, you guys are calling each other by your first name? What the fuck is going on here?
Yeah, because we just got done doing a rotation of like a very unusual deployment. He's like, look, y'all are conventional soldiers, and we're not going to put up with that shit no more. I was just like, oh, that's going to take a while to blend back into.
Yeah, for sure.
But man, that was a wild year. I mean, some of the coolest stuff, you know, we got some pretty cool vehicles. I learned how to ride a motorcycle. I remember we used to drive the Hilux trucks.
Yeah, the Hiluxes were badass.
I got a lot of good duty assignments on the post, you know. I remember I was in charge of fuel. I was going down to the fuel island, fueling up, you know, and even at one point too, I was in charge of the generator overnight. Like, I had that assignment.
Yeah, I remember that.
Go top off the generator. Man, I'll tell you, that thing was the loudest generator I've ever heard in my life. Like, you had to have earplugs in while this thing was running. And this thing was as long as like a Connex.
Yeah, I remember being pretty fucking big, for sure.
I mean, and this thing took probably, oh God, I want to say, to fill the thing up, it had like a 25 to 30 gallon. And I'm taking 5 gallon just tan, you know, gasoline cans and filling them up. So, like I said, Afghan was one of the greatest highlights of my military career because, you know, I'm over here in the middle of some country I've never been to. I'm some 21-year-old kid. And it was fun, you know. We got to see some things. We got to experience a lot of different things. And it was a lifetime experience with that one.
I agree 100%. Like you said, it's very, very unusual to most, you know. So, like, talk about like transitioning out. I mean, like, honestly, like, that's fucking hard. That's harder than being deployed, you know?
Yeah. So, like I said earlier, what had happened with me was what they called involuntary separation. Because the unit was going on another deployment or an overseas assignment or whatever they called it. They wanted 100%. Tour. Yeah. A training or whatever.
Yeah.
They wanted everyone, you know, like I said, ready to go. And I remember there was a large amount of, you know, senior NCOs that got wrapped into this as well. It was kind of a shit show, not gonna lie. And they set up rear D. Man, that was a nightmare. People just stopped coming to formations.
Really?
And, you know, people just they lost all care. And these were like senior NCOs that were they were frustrated because the way that, you know, First Division handled it. And basically it said if you didn't have the ability to re-enlist or whatever, you were just done. I remember there were NCOs that were in 15 years that got cut out.
That's crazy.
Because of that.
Yeah, I believe there was a big down draw happening at that time too.
Oh yeah. For me, I was just kind of like, you know, I at the point had a you know, roughly like year and a half, almost 2-year-old son, Riker Dwayne Kiggins. And he was very medically challenged, born with a heart defect and all kinds of other issues. But how that plays into, you know, the transitioning out is kind of a key factor here because I was okay with it. I was like, let me go home and raise my boy rightfully. Let me be there for him
Yeah.
through, going to be a very lifelong struggle for him. So I remember going home and telling my wife, like, we're leaving Fort Riley. And she was like, wow, like, and she moved out there 6 months into my deployment to Afghanistan. And I remember I coordinated that whole move
I
for
remember
her.
that too. I definitely remember that.
All from Afghanistan, coordinated, got an apartment set up, moved her out, So when I came back, got my own apartment, and that jumped me into my family life. That was the biggest thing too. Coming back from Afghanistan I got married. That'll play into, like my whole family spiel that hopefully I will be able to get into. Um, Nonetheless, so we're leaving, we're packing up, and I'm, gearing up, and we're going. So I'm like doing this ETS thing. The craziest thing happened though, because when I got down to finance at the final part of it, the finance lady's doing my final pay. She's like, "Yeah, you're going to be receiving a check of like $28,700 something dollars." I'm like,
Wow.
"Who's fucking with me here?"
Yeah,
Because
right.
there's no way. And it basically, because I almost met my 8 years as a soldier, I received a severance because
Oh,
I was
okay.
at that marker point where I just made the cutoff to be, paid out what they call involuntary separation pay. And I'm thinking, this is the greatest thing in my life. Like, I'm going to go home with a large chunk of money. I'll be able to actually get set up and take care of the things I need to. And especially, like I said, my son, because I'm gonna need a lot of this money being on private insurance off of TRICARE.
Sure.
Um, so long and short of it, my transition out was very difficult having a medically special needs child. Who, like I said, his name is Riker. He had 2 open heart surgeries before he was even a year old. And that was all while I was an active duty service member. Now, I remember the reason why we, like I told you, and I said I had the greatest leadership in, Fort Riley Alpha Company, because I remember I was there for the major surgeries. I was there for all of, a lot of the hospitalization, because he was in the hospital quite a bit that first year. And I felt like I was almost on my own, like miniature rear D. I actually ended up moving from second platoon to headquarters because of the situation, and them allowing me to be a part of um this whole ordeal with my son and his surgeries. um so like I said, that was a pretty big deal for me, is having that support behind it, a unit that was basically a bunch of seniors learning how to deal with a soldier, who had a kid of that level.
Sure. And then
uh,
obviously getting out and losing that support. I mean, I can't imagine the challenges like
that
dealing.
was so hard, losing the TRICARE, but because I had time left to serve on my contract, I was actually able to go into um, I think it was a reservist company out here in California, out of Concord, but I had to reclass to an 80 Mike.
Okay.
Now, that's the biggest thing, is that when I first got out, I came back, I got established, I got into my new unit, I explained to them the situation. I actually had medical benefits that carried for like another year or two, until my actual physical end date of my contract. So I had TRICARE first coming out,
Sure.
which was great because all of Riker's stuff picked right up. We got medical coverage. We got him set up with new doctors. We got him home. We got it set up, and we got established, which was nice, and it was really difficult because I'm trying to, look into housing, and I'm first coming back. Now, it's hard as a 28-year-old man to go home and tell your mom and dad, like, hey, I have nowhere to go. Can I live with you guys?
Sure.
So here I am coming back under mom and dad's roof as a grown ass man, married for, I mean, at this point, 10, almost 7 years. Because I'm getting ready to go on to 13 or 12 years of marriage this year. So I got married in 13. Yeah. So I'll be 13 years of marriage this year with Rebecca.
That's awesome.
So it was crazy because it was hard moving my wife into my parents' house,
Sure.
when not even 4 miles away. Her parents lived in the same town. We're from a small town, Salida, California. And like I said, it was hard retransitioning back to California with a kid who's got umpteen amount of medical issues, constant bi-weekly appointments, checkups. And it was really tough because time went on, and it just got to a point where it was really just difficult trying to manage it all, as well as trying to figure out what is being a civilian.
Yeah, right. Like I said, I can't imagine. That's hard enough.
So that's the hardest part, with my story is, not only am I this 28-year-old guy getting out of the military, and I'm trying to figure out how to be a civilian because I left for the Army as a 20-year-old kid. I mean, I didn't even know how to wash my own laundry when I left for the military. So here I am coming back as a grown man, and I'm trying to, set up and establish myself in housing. And, and it was difficult because I still remember, trying to get into a house. And I remember I had this bank lender, a guy tell me, he's like, yeah, you're a risk. And I remember I lost my shit in the bank on this dude. I was like, how are you going to call me a risk when I just served our country for 8-something years, and I'm a combat veteran, and I'm just trying to take care of my family, and you won't give me a loan because I haven't lived in the state for a year? I was from this state. I lived in this state my entire life. So it was one of those things, just sure. Corporate shit, with bank loans. And so I ended up living with my parents for probably the next 6 months. And like I said, that's when kind of tragedy struck my life. I'm trying to hold down jobs and trying to, get through life, trying to deal with, my son Riker and all of the things that he's going through. It was a crazy, just like summer day. Just, my wife wakes up. She's like, hey, Riker's not feeling good. I think I'm going to take him to the ER. I says, yeah. And I remember, I think it was like I worked like a weird shift the day before or something. And she's like, do you want to come? I was like, I think I'm going to get some sleep, so lo and behold, it's hard now thinking about it, going back. I wish I had got my ass out of that bed that morning. But it was hours later, I received a phone call from my wife. I couldn't even understand her. I couldn't even understand my mother-in-law. I basically am being told by like a nurse at this point, your son's had a seizure. He's they ended up getting him resuscitated. And at this point, I'm at home, and I'm like, so I grabbed my dad, get in the fucking car, let's go. And then she texts me, she's like, can you get my dad too? And I get my mom in the car. So my parents are in the car, and I go and pick up my father-in-law. And I still remember, I jump on one of our main highways. I'm doing like 108 miles an hour in my car I had at the time, given the circumstance.
Yeah,
and,
of course.
My mom's like holding on to the handles in the car, and my father-in-law's like, hands on my shoulders, like, he's like, son, we're not going to get there alive if you don't slow down. I was like, sit back and let me drive, people.
Sure. For good reason.
So I was like, I drove crazy military vehicles in some crazy terrain. I know how to drive. I still to this day tell you I'm a professional driver. That will beg to differ. But, I get to the hospital. I don't even park my car. I roll up under where they, bring people in for ER. And my buddy's standing out there. He's like, just go. He hops in the car. My family gets out. And they already know. So there's a nurse. They bring me to the back, and I'm standing in there. I'm seeing my son. I've seen all these doctors and nurses. He's had all these wires, and he's got a tube in his mouth. And it's just, it's like the worst of the worst you could ever picture out of the situation that you're already used to. Like I've already seen my son with these tubes and these wires and things coming out of his chest for drainage from his heart surgery. So to me, it was nothing new. So, it was hard. I remember we sat there for hours, and he was responsive. And it was like he like was able to open his eyes, but it's not like, I don't feel like he was fully 100 because of everything going on for him. It was really difficult, I think. But in the fact that, Becca and I were there, I turned to the doctor. I says, well, so what are we looking at here? He says, I mean, we're waiting on a life flight to get him to a special children's UCSF in San Francisco. So at this point now we're just kind of like, those movies you see two parents just brutally upset and, fawning over their kid. And the rush of emotions, it's just, I can relive them almost every other day when I talk about this. We're waiting on a life flight. They show up. The doctors are there. They scoot all the, the nurses and the hospital staff out of the way. They're prepping them. And I remember very, very vividly, they asked us to leave so they can make a sanitary, transition.
Okay.
But before all of this, it was one of those things like I had said, I want all my family coming in here, so they can see him if something's going to, happen. So the thing was that my whole family, everyone got in there. They got to see him. They got to speak their piece. This was before they were actually prepping him. It was a request I asked. Usually hospitals don't do this, but, I was like, we don't know what's going to happen here. So I remember at the last point, they asked me and Becca to leave the room so they could get him ready. We walked out of the hallway, and I'm standing in the hallway, and I see this nurse just come out. And she throws her head up, puts her hands on her hip, and you see the tears. Like, I mean, I know I was in there, and it was a pretty rough room. You got this 3-year-old kid on a gurney, and you're trying to save his life, because he had this just mysterious seizure. And the doctor comes back out, and they're like, your son just coded again. I says, so they pull us back in the room, and they're doing chest compressions, and they're trying to get him going. And minutes go by. And in my mind, from, just our military days and our, semi-formal, first aid training and aid training and combat life-saving, I mean, I see a room full of nurses, some doctors, and at this point, it's a time you don't really see people in that industry lose their composure.
Sure.
I mean, I've seen, nurses just like holding each other, just, really just feeling the emotion. And me and my wife at this point are standing there just like, it's so much to take in. Like, it's the heaviest thing that you think you could go through in life. And, at one point they basically were just like, they were going and going. And I told the doctor, it's like, stop, at this point, there will be no quality of life if you guys even bring him back right now. And I remember, so the doctors, upon my request, it was just like, all right, and they called it, so he passed away June 7th at 9:38 p.m. So it was it was really hard because I remember how many phone calls flew out that night. I had people from Alpha Company that I hadn't had contact with at that point, probably well over 6-7 months, just already heard the news, and they're like, let us know what we can do. And it was hard because I'm this 28-year-old man who just served almost a decade in the military, and I lost my firstborn son. And I'm thinking, how does someone carry on from this? How does somebody pick themselves up and move forward? And I lost myself. I went down a path that people should not venture down, and I really lost myself. And a substance that was already kind of there in my life, always had been, as being a soldier, or drinkers, because in the military, you can't do hard drugs. You can't smoke marijuana, where it's literally today,
Sure,
nearly legal in every, state. I turned to the bottle, and I let myself go so badly to a point where it almost cost me my marriage. It ruined and put damage on a lot of family relationships.
I mean, honestly, man, like, you can't blame your son. That's crazy heavy. I mean, like, I respect you more than you know. Like, I don't think I could do what you did. I don't think I could do it.
The courage it took for me to really pull through was just a multitude of events that happened from that day forward. I think the biggest thing that pulled me through was, the support of a loving wife that stood by me while I just destroyed my life. Had this, call it a pity party. I very much, and it's hard because my wife and I are on this understanding now. I was very greedy in my son's loss. I
So
made it
go
about,
into that. Like I talk about how do you feel that you were self-destructive? Just so maybe other people can learn from this. Other people
I
can.
felt that, in my opinion, I made it about me because I lost a lot of time with him because of our training and our gunneries and the things that we were doing at Alpha Company while I was in service. I got to be there for the big surgeries. I got to be there for the minor things. I got to go to some appointments over the time. I think what made it let me be that I wanted it to be about me is the fact that I lost so much time while I was a service member. But then I got the quality 6 months of time with him uninterrupted when I ETS'd out involuntarily. It was like a blessing in disguise, and I felt robbed. I was like, I finally get out. I'm my own man. I'm trying to live my life and take care of my family in a different manner. And he's just gone. And so the thing is, it's just like the destruction was just, I was trying to deal with the loss of a son whilst being in a young marriage. I'm 28 years old, and I'm thinking to myself, how does a marriage survive something like this? And it's our first, and we've only been married under a
You've
decade.
also just
And
got out
I'm
of the
thinking to
military.
myself, how does somebody carry on from this? And all the while I'm just drinking my pain away because I don't want to talk about it. And that's the funny thing. That is just true to the core rock, just man foundation. Like, we don't talk about our emotions. We don't go to counseling. We don't need mental health. It's bullshit.
It's bullshit.
They, men are just like any other human being. We have emotions. We are people. We feel. We love. We laugh. And I hate that stigma that as a man in a situation like that, where you're supposed to just man up and get through it or whatever. There's no just manning up and getting through
No.
watching your first son pass away in front of you. So I tell people, it's hard not to want to choose a substance and numb the pain. So I can't sit here and tell you, I can now. I can tell you it ain't worth it. I could tell you no amount of alcohol is ever going to bring him back or make me feel any less pain that I still carry to this day, nearly 6 years later of him being gone.
Sure.
I mean, I would have had almost a 10-year-old son now, and I can't even imagine who he would have been, what he would have been like. It's crazy to think.
Sure.
And like I said, it wasn't but through like a multitude of events and my drinking getting way out of hand that I finally decided to get a hold on it when my wife was like, I'm not living this life anymore with you, and I'm going to divorce you.
I actually remember you and I having a few conversations about
Yeah.
drinking.
You were there. I remember you being there for me through a lot of these dark times because I would call you and you would sit there on the phone and just listen and just, you were like, brother, you ever think about stopping?
I did.
You were just like, just straight hit the cement wall. Like, do you ever think about just giving it up, and not throwing away everything you have because there's ways around this to deal with it? And we had a lot of heartfelt conversations, and you checked on me constantly through all of this. I remember, as well as having other friends just like you that were there for me. But you know how it's like they say you can lead a horse to the water, but you can't make him drink?
Sure.
Real deal. You can, and that's what it was. Nobody didn't want to not help me through what I was going through, but they were getting tired. And it was an emotional level of trying to deal with somebody who just wants to go to work and then come home and drown myself until I don't have to think anymore. And then, the things that came behind that. My parents having to carry me to bed, my wife having to literally at some nights shower me just so that I could, it was embarrassing that I let myself go so bad. And that was the thing I didn't do. I didn't mourn with my wife. I let it be about me, and I went and I became very greedy. And it was kind of sad because my family told me, you guys need to go to counseling. You guys need to do something. You guys can't do what you're doing. Like, we never really got that real chance to mourn him together because of my actions and because of the way I was living my life. And eventually, after so long, we just kind of we made it through, if you will. We got through it. You know, I cleaned myself up. I remember going to an AA program. I did for almost 9 months to a year.
That's awesome,
I
dude.
met a lot of great people. You know, and it's crazy how small the world can be. You know, because the guy sponsored me lost his son too.
Oh, wow.
You know, jumped right into a bottle and other hard drugs himself, but you know, I learned a lot from this man, and he made me feel human again. And you know, between this guy and the family support, and you know, Becca standing by me, I remember that, you know, at the break of all of this, there was one night with my dad. He was trying to talk to me. He's like, your mother and I aren't going to continue to allow this in our home. You're 20, 29 years old, 28. Um, I can't help you as a father in something I've never been through. And I'm trying, and you know, and it's hard. I remember my father going through this. My father's not an emotional man. And I've seen my father cry but one time in my whole life, and that was at my son's funeral. I don't think I've ever seen my father cry. I mean, he was one of those very old school dads. Like, he didn't even cry at his own mom's funeral. And I'm like, Mom's dad okay? Like, he's not even. So it was funny because I had that kind of dad that was very solid rock foundation. We don't cry. We don't, you know. So it was hard for my dad to watch me go through what I had to go through.
Sure.
And I remember that night I had like an all-out panic attack, and he tried to grab me to get me, you know, to calm down. And I remember like we went down to the floor, and you know, I'm like thrashing around, and he's trying to get a hold of me. And then I remember my older brother comes to grab me. I'm like, the stories that you hear about like a PTSD soldier just losing his shit.
Yeah.
I remember after a while, I finally calmed down, and you know, we're all sitting there, and everyone's all just out of breath, trying to, you know, recompose themselves. And now at this point, my dad's crying again. So this was the second time I've ever seen my dad cry. He says, you know, I can't help you, son. If you think you know, you need to do whatever it is you got to do to end your suffering and your pain, and you want to drink your life into a bottle, then just know that your mother and I are going to have to be okay with watching you go down this path because you don't want to help yourself. But he said, God damn it, if you're going to just continue to desecrate your son's memory, I can't stand by you as a father knowing you have a life to live, and you're a husband, and you're drowning yourself in a bottle. Only you can help yourself, and when you're not ready to, then you're going to continue down this path. And it was like something in my soul broke that
Yeah,
day.
but that's really heavy to hear from. I mean, if I heard something like that from my father, it would stand hard with me.
And that day I decided to get myself clean for my wife, and I decided to live the life I need to honor my son. Because the life I'd been living after he passed, all I was doing was being greedy, selfish, desecrating his memory. Is all I wanted to do was, oh, poor me, you know. Granted, you know, like I said, there were the circumstances, you know, but I had a good life. I was blessed to be his father for, you know, the time I had him. And I'm glad that I got that experience, not only as being an active duty soldier, but learning how to be a father and cope with those heavy family.
Yes.
Do I be a family man today, or do I tell my first sergeant, fuck you, I'm not going to the field. My son's got, you know, and there were a lot of those attempts that I remember, even military time. I remember I did something crazy one point. It was closer to almost getting out. And I remember I used to open door policy at what was it? Battalion. I remember I went to our battalion lieutenant colonel. It was something to the fact of having to go out or for a field training or something. And I remember going in there and using an open door policy, and I ripped my rank off my chest. I set it on his desk, and I says, this is a man talking to a man. We can forget all the facade here, because I'm going to put it on to you like this. And I remember as a man, as a soldier, choosing those heavy family decisions as a father. And I remember asking the colonel at the time, "Do you have kids?" And he said, "Well, yeah." And I says, "Okay, well, imagine your kid has all this and this and this going on. Are you going to go to the field for some training you've done with your eyes shut 6 times over?
Right.
Or are you going to stand by your family and hope that maybe somebody will give me the generosity to have some family time or whatever leave that I can take to be with my family in this, time?"
Right.
So, it was funny because I've seen those instances in that night and my father telling me those things. And even me now as a father, because that's the beauty of my story, is that where there's darkness, there's always light.
That's actually something I wanted to highlight. I mean, go right into it.
Yeah.
I want to know what, and you just said that certain instance kind of snapped you out per se, but like talk
Yeah.
about like composing yourself. Talk about like what you did to save yourself.
Like I said, I got myself cleaned up. I stopped drinking. I learned that I didn't have the power to, per se, moderate myself. So maybe drinking was just not going to be for me for a while until I can learn how to either control it or moderate it or know that it's social or whatever.
Great decision. Yeah.
And I remember I got myself into college. I decided, it's time to get myself into better life standpoint. And I put myself into a technical college called UTI, and they train for heavy duty diesel mechanics and just your generic Ford, Chevy mechanics.
Yeah, I remember you joining this. I remember you starting this.
I chose to take the path of heavy duty diesel. I says, after getting out of the military and being around it, in the motor pool and the Bradleys, the Humvees, all of our military vehicles during Afghanistan time, and we had to do a lot of like the maintenance on those during our time while we were there. I says, that couldn't be a hard job and I'm driving down the highway and I'm thinking, if you're driving down the highway, what is at least half of the vehicles traveling next to you?
What's that?
It's just like, as in like a question to you. Like, you're driving down the highway. What is half of the vehicles driving next to you?
Oh, you're saying diesel.
Diesel, truck and trailers.
Yeah, you're not
haulers,
there.
So I thought to myself, well, hey, why not jump into a job like this? This has got to be a pretty steady job. I mean, these things need major maintenance, oil changes at least every, 15,000 miles. And these trucks run, so imagine a vehicle that barely ever turns off, like, things break, hoses and, whatever. So, I got myself through a schooling, and I got my life together. And right as I'm about to graduate school, I'm coming out, hopefully to jump into the field. It's closer to like 2017 at this point. My wife is like, I'm pregnant, so here I am, my life's cleaned up and, I'm trying to live a better life. And I'm getting ready to have my second son and I'm graduating from this, technical college. And it was really exciting because when I found out I was having a second son, it was like I said, it was like all the darkness I went through. This was the light that finally came to my life. And it was exciting again. Like our marriage was going good. And, I was doing the things I needed to do. And, I got myself to a point where I needed to start choosing, to live my life for myself and for my family. So what was great about that is now I'm getting out in the field. I'm finding out that I'm having a second son. And I'm like, I have ambitions and I want to move up, so I'm at the job I'm at. And, like I said, is when we're finding out, like I said, just graduating and starting into this job that she's pregnant. And I'm like, okay, well, and I'm realizing at the time I was only making $12.75 an hour or something. And I got ambitious and I was like, I need a better job, and especially in the California economy where, nothing's cheap.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So, I ended up moving on and taking my schooling experience into, further into this. And, it was great, so, the funny thing is now I'm working, I'm a diesel technician and, we're getting ready to have our son. It was later on in the pregnancy that the doctors came to us and they were like, okay, so we're finding some issues with the pregnancy. So I'm thinking to myself, oh, I don't know if we're going to be able to do this again. Just because of Riker, we had, when she was, pregnant the second time, extensive, high level care through this whole pregnancy because of all of the genetic factors that happened with Riker.
Sure.
We were actually able to, have that level of care that led us to this finding. So the doctor's like, your son's probably going to have Down syndrome. I was like, okay, well, I know what that is, but never really dealt with it personally.
Yeah. What is it really?
And aren't these kind of fluke tests? You can't even tell, it's, by blood paneling and testing that they do on women when they're pregnant. Well, what are the actual odds my son's got? So they recommended to do like an amnio where they could take directly from. And my wife was like, fuck that. I'm going to, if I'm going to have this kid and he's going to have a whatever, that's our son. I'm not doing that to my pregnancy. So she took a very hard stance. And I was like, I'm not telling you what to do with your body. At the end of the day, as a man, it ain't no man's right to tell a woman what to do with her body.
Sure.
So I stood by her and I was like, we'll get what we get, So I remember it's December, we're getting ready. And this is so great because you know me, bro. She comes in the room and I'm sleeping. She's like, my water just broke. And of course I'm like, a man waking up like, so late in the night. And I remember we hop her in the car and we're like 13 miles from the hospital. And I'm like zooming down the road. I'm doing like 85 to the hospital because she's like having contractions. And I remember making it to the hospital. It's like a 13-mile trip or something, or 7. And I remember making it. It's like a 17-minute drive, and I made it to the hospital in 9 minutes.
Cut it in half.
And it was funny because we're walking in the hospital, and I'm like, we got a baby coming. Get out of the way. And so, we get up to labor and delivery, and the nurse is like, oh, we got a live one on our hands. And I was just so excited. I'm having my second son. I'm getting to be there for his birth.
Yeah.
So just naturally, waiting, and it's funny, I'm just doing all these funny things and just like making Becca laugh. And she's just like, you got to stop. Like, so he's finally born, and it's December 15th, and I'm having my second son, and I'm so excited because they pull him out, and the nurse is, I keep having these really cool situations in my life. The nurse who actually, because you know how it's like you're in a hospital room and the doctor comes in for like 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And the nurse is the one that's actually there with your spouse the whole night.
Right.
The nurse throughout the night was talking to us our early morning, and she was like, I have a son with Down syndrome, and he's 20-something years old, and she's showing us pictures, and I'm still on like we don't even know he's going to have Down syndrome. Come on now. So I'm thinking to myself, we just got to wait and see. So she finally has Ronan, and the nurse is standing there when the doctor pulls Ronan out, and I see her face just light up. I'm all like, oh no. And she bends down to Becca. She's like, your son has Down syndrome. And I'm just thinking to myself, okay, well, here we go. It's just another life experience, for me. So so they go, they take them, and they take the cord blood. They're like, we're going to take cord blood because this will give us a absolute on, you know what I mean? And at this point, me and Becca are looking at them, and I'm like, we don't need an absolute. You know what Down syndrome kids look like. They're very, very unique and special in their own looks. So, here I am, and I look at the nurses like, I think we're going to have to connect on, like, social media here. And I remember I befriended the nurse, and, so did my wife, and this lady has been a part of Ronan's life up till now. I send her pictures of him.
That's awesome, man. I love to hear that.
Birthday.
And he's a super cute kid, man. He's a super cute kid.
And usually where most of those kinds of relationships are right there in the hospital, and that's that. You meet really cool people, and then they're gone.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, this is one lady that's kind of stuck around in my life, you know, and, you know, it's really cool because I've had, you know, an ability to reach out and say, hey, did you ever have these struggles or those struggles? You know, and it was just really cool to have that support, you know. And then now, you know, here I am. I've got a second son, and it was crazy. I would have never thought of having that blessing again in my life.
How is Ronan these days? Like, talk about you know, being a parent of a child with Down syndrome. How's that been?
Cool. I might be able to introduce him real quick. You guys gotta meet him real quick.
Yes.
Well, looks like nap time hit before.
That's okay. That's okay. Maybe part 2.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm down with that.
So, life with a Down syndrome son. You know, once again, it's another learning curve for me, for my wife, and we're just thinking like, okay, you know, like we're learning with him because she's never had a kid with Down syndrome. I've never had a kid with Down syndrome. But he's so smart. Like, I mean, not just saying that because I'm his father, but I mean, this is like, you know, most Down syndrome kids are extremely delayed. Very, very much so physically and tonally. They have like low muscle tone. That's why when you look at them, like their hands look like club-like and their face is real, you know, the natural Down syndrome characteristic. He just, and for him, he you could tell if you look at him certain instances and you've been around kids like that or you know people like that. But you know, through his testing, and he's already in like pre-K. We did early developmental intervention at 6 months with him, and I think that was the greatest thing we could have done with the help of this nurse. And we got in these programs, and we had these people. They come to the house
like a caretaker almost, or like a okay.
And they basically helped him. He's only on the spectrum when they start, you know, like when you take your typical children and you're measuring them by their milestones. Like, are they, you know, hand to mouth?
Sure.
Are they grabbing objects? And you know what I mean? For him, he only measured out about 6 months behind.
Yeah, that's
whereas
awesome.
Most Downs kids are over 2 years behind in development mentally.
I love that. That's awesome.
He's very intuitive. He's very smart. He speaks very clearly, like just in the few, like the words and the things.
I always see Becca posting like, Ronan said this to me today. It's like something ridiculous. I love it.
It's just, and that's the funniest thing is that what they don't tell you when you get a kid with Down syndrome is life tends to be like 78% happier overall. The kid's the light of my life, you know. Like I said, he
I love seeing
really
pictures of you guys.
Back. And I mean, every day is so fun with him, and just watching him learn and watching him grow. Like I said, and then we're at that age right now. He's about to be 5 this December. You know, all about daddy. I come home, runs to me, like just. Yeah. I can't tell you unless like you're a parent, and you're only going to understand this as a parent. But you know those days where you come home and your littles just come rushing at you, like give you the tackle hug.
Yeah.
Bro, and that tight little just hug squeeze. It's a feeling it's like euphoria.
I wish I could bottle it. You know, my kids when I come home they go, "Daddy's home." And they all come running, they come beat my ass. Like, oh, I love it.
I wish you could bottle that feeling, just kind of open it up a little bit where you're sad, bro, because that just melts. Dude, I could come home just, you know, like my boss and my job. And
you know, the other day Finn at school had this thing where they had like a rain cloud, and each ray had like how old he was, favorite food, favorite animal. It said, "What do you want to be when you get older?" He said, "Just like my dad." And my heart fucking melted, dude. It's still like I have it on the fridge. Yeah, it's good stuff.
That's the greatest part though, is about being a father. Is I got all these experiences now I didn't get with Riker, and it's like a blessing. Like I'm happy now because I know the life that my son would have endured had he still been alive today. So it to me is one of those things where the stupid things people say, well, he's in a better place now. Absolutely. Because I believe his life would have had a lot of suffering with the conditions he carried. I'm very blessed. I have a second son with nothing but Down syndrome.
Right.
And that's the other thing too. A lot of Down's kids, they have a lot of medical problems, heart problems, stomach problems, muscular, curricular,
Yeah, like with tone issues, a lot of tone issues and therapy and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's funny because if you've ever met a Down syndrome man and shaken his hand, they're just like solid. I mean, my boy's like that now when he gives you a fist bump. He's just like,
you're like, ow.
Right? So it's funny because it's like you see these kids and they say they're low muscle tone, but these kids are pretty strong,
That's awesome.
I'll be trying to take something from him and it's just like death grip status. I'm like, bro, will you just let it go?
I know sometimes toddler strength is pretty strong.
It's like a strength they can't explain, But like I said, he's actually, with everything that we did, we got him very advanced in a matter that I feel like, again, not just saying this because I'm his father, I think he's going to be what you consider a very high functioning Down syndrome man. I think that he'll be able to do a lot of most things. Again, he is still young. He is only 5. So it's hard to say, will he have his own house? Will he drive his own car? Will he have a job? Those are all things that come in the time as they develop through school age, right, that you can really kind of test those cognitive abilities on them. But there's a lot of Down syndrome people out there that people don't understand. They are people too. They just look different and they talk different. But at the end of the day, there are successful Down syndrome people out there that own their own companies, mind you. They're the owner, and mom and dad are probably on the side as all the financial being of it. But they're still out there. They got their own little business. They're doing like little, whatever, selling T-shirts or socks or hats or memorabilia. I follow quite a few channels on like Instagram. Some of these guys are like YouTube chef cooks on barbecues and in the kitchen. And it's the cutest thing to watch them, just these grown people acting just like us. And they, like I said, they just look and sound different, but they're very successful people in life. They're, that's the thing too, to kind of get into some stigma there. And remember when I had him, I used to say the word retard all the time. Like I thought it was the funniest word in the world. It's very much a word that doesn't exist in my vocabulary. And it's weird now being a part of the community of people when you're standing somewhere and you hear someone call someone with autism or Down syndrome or retard, you're just like, like you're just like, excuse me?
Yeah, right.
So it's just like, it's a word that's just so harshly, when you join that community, you have a kid with those needs, like, and you learn that word actually means something, and it's huge in that community. Like, they call it the R word, we don't use it. We don't say it. But it's the funniest thing, like when, like I've seen the instance in like, groups that I've gone to with other Downs kids when, we get Ronin out for these events they do in our town. I remember this one time, this Down syndrome kid was mad at his mom. He was like, "Stop talking to me, retard." I was just like, I couldn't help but laugh, and my wife slapped me in the chest, like, "Stop laughing!" Like,
I would laugh so hard.
Like, it was just so genuine. Like, he was mad at his mom, and it just like that's what he said. And I was just like, all right,
that's classic.
So it's this organization that we're a part of. It's called T-Bots, and they do these big events, and they're all Down syndrome, special needs, autism, and they get together and they do these big group events at parks, like barbecues and jumpers, and it just really helps other parents meet, other parents. Sure. And I've been out in public before. Just for instance, about 2-3 weeks ago, I'm at the motorcycle shop trying to buy a new helmet, and there's this lady walking around, and I have Ronan with me, and I look over at her son, and sure as shit, teenage Down syndrome boy, And every time I see a Down syndrome person, I melt. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because I'm a father of a Down syndrome kid, but I always like to introduce myself, introduce Ronan. And, so the lady, once again, she's like, oh, is he in this and this? Start talking about programs and help, because seeing that he's a toddler. And it was just so funny because Ronan, not even knowing this kid, walked up and hugged
that's
him
cute.
around his legs. It was the cutest thing. And the boy's mom was like, that is just the most adorable. I was like, aren't they just the greatest human beings in the world?
Right.
Like perfectly impure, you know?
That's awesome, man. I love hearing all this. If you had to give kind of a wrap up statement, especially helping people getting out and then dealing with a crazy adversity. I mean, whatever it may be, not even just the same as yours. Like, what would you say? Like, how would you guide someone to work themselves through that?
I would tell people, there are so many support elements, and especially as being a part of a motorcycle club that I ride with, an all veterans club, or to people in general. As a whole, life is beautiful. It's precious. And I tell people every day is a blessing, never guaranteed tomorrow. If you got kids, no matter how much you want to pull your hair out or how much they make you mad, as a man who's lost a son early on, I tell people, love that child, because in just per se, we're saying I couldn't imagine going through that. Well, imagine having your kids here and being able to love them. I don't have that with my first son. So my statement to people is this: love your kids, be a parent, work through the trials and the struggles. I get it, but you know what? Your kid's acting up. I guarantee you this one thing: 2 weeks from that instance, you're not even going to ever remember that happened.
Nope.
It's like, pitter patter, just it happened, it's gone.
Right.
So, why fuss over, spilled milk? Some newspaper over it, carry on. You know what I mean?
No, I love that. I think that's absolutely amazing.
The big thing is that, love your kids, get help when you need help. Don't be embarrassed to reach out. That's the biggest thing, is there are so many people that don't just reach out. They have family. There's counselors. There's psychiatry. There's medication routes if you want to go that far. There are so many things that you can do for positive outlets. A lot of people like getting into working out, the gym lifestyle, very, very positive outlet, actually.
I would say I'm one of those guys, I think.
Yes. So find something that makes you happy. Find something that drives you, and stay focused. No amount of substance is going to make you feel good, because you're just going to wake up the next day sober with it all right there.
Right. All come right back. And I love that, man. That's a beautiful statement. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah.
I appreciate you telling your story. I'm sorry, you have something to say? Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was going to say, it's the general idea of that every day is a blessing. And I leave you with this as my final statement. Everything or everyone in life will either be a lesson or a blessing. It's up to you to choose what those people will be. For me, I've always felt through the things I've been through, I'm kind of like a hybrid to that. I'm both a lesson and a blessing to people.
Yeah, for sure. So, I agree. I love that. That's a really great statement. Well, again, I thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your story.